Right. Hi everyone. Hope everyone is doing well as we returned back after Hurricane Douglas. I'm really happy that it did miss us and there wasn't any major damage or issues that we experienced here on campus. Um, I will say that it was my first, and it's a learning curve I think for everyone. But I want to thank everyone for your patience, especially as we got messages through, and dealing with the challenges as they evolved. Um, we're back on one of our COVID calls as we continue to plan for our return. We are still working a lot on our plans and preparing for the return to campus. And so I wanted to provide some updates. Together with the update, I just want to remind everyone that as I started this type of meeting in mid-March, a lot of these decisions and or positions are pretty fluid, and so things are changing. I do want to call out a couple of things that are relatively new. One of them is the potential for the Department of Education to push their start to August 17th. More on that as it continues to evolve. But that's something that typically, when one of us, whether it's higher ed or DOE, make any changes, it tends to impact us in some capacity. And so we're navigating what that means for us. I will say that, on a personal note, it definitely impacts, my home. And so we're dealing with those challenges as they materialize. Um, and so we continue to make progress. Our guidelines for return are still not quite there yet, and that's because there's quite a bit that continues to change. I'm sure that you've noticed, there have been some spikes in COVID cases over the last actually week or so, where we've seen a pretty high number. We're hopeful that those reduce over time. Um, it doesn't seem to be a state threat that justifies major shifts, but there have been conversations on restricting travel a little further. The quarantine exception for a clean COVID test got pushed to September 1st. We don't know whether that'll continue to get pushed. And so again, even though we're making plans for our return, we always have to have in the back of our mind the possibility of what happened to us just after spring break, where we all moved online. And so that's why we've been pushing so hard for most of us to have all of the tools necessary to perform our functions in an online environment. Now, I'm going to go over a couple of updates, as well as within the updates respond to some of the questions that have been submitted through the link. The first thing that I want to address is the quarantine bubble. I don't know how many of you have noticed those communications going out and even in the media. What's happening is that with the quarantine exception being pushed to September 1st, the universities in the state of Hawaii have pulled together to work with the state in creating this quarantine bubble. And what that really represents is that if we have students that happen to be on the mainland, and they have activities that are happening on campus, whether it's classes or whatever, some events, these students can request an exception from the quarantine, where the colleges take on the onus of following up with these students and doing whatever the state had been doing with the quarantine folks. We don't know all of the details on how we're going to manage all of this process, and we're hoping that the numbers are really tiny and that we don't have many students that happen to be elsewhere that are traveling and want to take advantage of the quarantine bubble. But all that's happening is that these students are going to get like a hall pass that basically says, I'm a UH student, and by virtue of being a UH student, I can go from home to school. But I still have to do everything else that quarantine individuals would have to do, and that's just stay at home, etc. And so we're navigating that. We're trying to figure out how we operationalize that locally. The system is trying to do the same thing. It's likely that by the end of the week or early next week, there'll be a message sent out to those students that have an out-of-state address in the system, basically saying you need to take advantage of this, you need to connect with us in some capacity, and it's like a promissory note that says things like, I'm not going to get on a taxi. I'm not going to, do anything that's going to spread almost anything that they may be carrying. What's important too with this quarantine bubble is that if I were coming from the mainland and abiding by the 14-day quarantine rules, all that I would have to do is fly into the state of Hawaii and stay put for 14 days. The quarantine bubble actually requires that these individuals have a COVID test. So it's a layer of scrutiny that's a little bit more than the typical quarantine. And so that should be a little bit more meaningful for us. We also don't, given the number of classes that we have face-to-face and the fact that most of our students are really local, we shouldn't really experience much from that. But I wanted to bring that up in conversation today because it's new from the last time that we had one of these check-in meetings. The next thing that I want to address is yesterday you got an email about the Daily Check app. And so we don't know the specifics on how it's going to operationalize, but the expectation is that all students and employees are going to go through this, whether it's phone-based app or online, and check in through questionnaires that basically indicate that I feel healthy and I haven't really been exposed to anything that may be at a risk. In the event that we are feeling some symptoms, the app is actually going to tell us that we probably should stay home and that we should connect with our instructor or connect with our supervisor, letting them know that we're staying home because we're not feeling well. And so these are just preventative mechanisms that we're putting in place so that as we return for the fall semester, we feel a level of safety and in that we're putting processes in place that are going to hopefully prevent any further spread of the virus. With that, some of the questions that have trickled in really stemmed from a request for an addendum to the Student Code of Conduct. And that is a reflection on what we are doing to reduce the likelihood of exposure on campus for anything that's happening on site. And that is based on the facial coverings and other indicators that may be related to code of conduct. And so we are expecting that students use the facial coverings when they are getting any of our services, including classes. Any instance of the student refusing to wear the mask should be treated like we would treat almost any situation on the code of conduct. What I will say, and there have been questions that have been raised on this, is what do we do with students that are refusing to wear a mask, refusing to leave the classroom, or refusing to leave a space where we're providing a service? At that point, if it gets to a health and safety risk to any of us, then we can reach out and should contact security to help us with the students. And so again, it's based on triggers. If a student refuses to wear a mask for whatever reason and you simply ask them to not come into the classroom and they leave, that should be treated that way, and the student just leaves the classroom and we're good. But if the student refuses to leave the classroom and refuses to wear the mask, then we treat it like code of conduct again. When that student becomes a little bit of a risk, then we can reach out to security to help out. We're hopeful that because we don't have that many classes face-to-face, and that hopefully we would have segregated, and the students that want to come on campus realize that safety is important, that we shouldn't really encounter those issues. And so we do want to apply a little bit of the honor system. If students are coming here, we hope that they realize that we're all abiding by these expectations for their safety and that of ours as well. And so that's on code of conduct. There is a review of that addendum that speaks to some of the challenges that may arise because of COVID-19 and how we would manage some of those student behaviors. Okay. The next thing that I wanted to talk about today, and some of you probably got the communications or even logged on while we were doing it, is that not last Friday, but the previous Friday, we held a live session for really the community, our students, parents, current students, future students, in just getting a sense of what the fall return would look like. We have been getting some questions through various email accounts on students wanting to know what fall will look like before they register or before they make any commitments. And so we tried to answer a lot of questions. I think it was a positive meeting. We got some really good feedback from the students, and we got some additional questions that bubbled up during the call as well as afterwards. And those questions, actually, if you listened to the session that we held, I probably repeated myself like 7 times answering the very same question. And this question revolved around clarity on schedule. Students are still unsure. They're not finding it easy to determine when they're supposed to be on campus or even online for all of our hybrid iterations. And so we're going to probably look for a way of communicating this a little bit better to the students. And so I think the challenges exist where, it may be alternating weeks that they're meeting or alternating days, or however the classes have come together, it's creating a little bit of confusion among the students. And so, through K and maybe the academic side, we're going to try to clarify some of that and maybe get to a situation where we could send students that are registered in some classes what they can expect as a schedule. And the reason that this is bubbling up, and I've had some conversations, is really just planning as a whole. Whether the students have anyone that they're taking care of because DOE is out or DOE is using alternating schedules as well. They want to plan out what Wednesday and from what time to what time they're going to need to be on campus for those few classes that are still meeting. And so that's become the biggest highlight of the questions that have been coming in. There are students that are worried about coming to campus, like there are students that are worried because there are no face-to-face classes for them. And so we're getting a mixed bag, but wherever we could communicate and clarify some of these things, that would be incredibly ideal. So, work with us and support us as we're trying to address some of those student concerns. Like I said earlier, University of Hawaii put out their interim guidelines for our safe return. We have been operating under those guidelines, and we have been setting forward some recommendations for our own guidelines to be in alignment, but also reflect the uniqueness that it is to be in Leeward. And so some of the things that are going to come up, of course, is the publication of the guidelines, but also, how we follow through with communicating instances of COVID. So if I'm sick, the app is going to capture a lot, but there should be a lot of communication between us as employees and our supervisors if there's any instance where we may have to work remotely. And so all of these things come together with those guidelines. And I will share this as I'm speaking publicly right now, that when we publish those guidelines, we probably will use a phrase like interim just because things continue to change. And so we want to be responsive to that. Again, the focus is health and safety. And so we do want to maintain that wherever and however possible. And we'll continue to address things as they bubble up. There will be some training that will be disseminated. It'll be really like video. And so the idea is, some best practices for our return, whether we are instructors or we are staff or within our own spaces, just so that when we do return for fall operations, we are in a better place. We have been getting deliveries of things like sanitizers and masks and face shields and sneeze guards and whatnot. There will be, we will be communicating as these things are put in effect, but please do work with your division chair or your coordinator or your unit head, as plans are catered based on the unit that you are working for. And so with that, I'm going to just go quickly into some of the other questions that have come about, and then I'll open it up for any other questions that are coming in, and or anyone else that may need to share something. But very, very quickly, there was a question that came in the last time, and just for more clarity on it, it's based on DPC and digitizing and scanning materials. My understanding is still that the divisions have their own bylaws on how they manage this. And so your best source of information would be to go to your division chair, just to make sure that whatever is decided at the division level is what's going to be followed. And again, the idea here, I'm assuming based on the question, is whether we're going to need to come to campus to review the materials for contract renewals and tenure and promotion, et cetera. And also or travel. And so a lot of people are submitting things online, and so that should reduce the need for it. It's those instances where there will be some physical dossiers that need to be reviewed. But again, if you could funnel those questions to your division chair, they'll make it to where, if any changes need to happen, they can, based on, the division's discussion. So there's a question on, we're seeing increases in the number of COVID cases. What are the chances that classes will need to be offered fully online in the fall? I don't know in terms of a statistician's position on what the likelihood would be, but I would say that, as we've been saying all along, we're preparing for that scenario. Whether it happens before the start of the semester or if it happens, around Thanksgiving or any other time when there is spikes in traveling, we should consider situations where we may need to just go fully online. And so I can't say that it's going to happen at a given time, and I can't say that it will happen at all. But we should prepare for that situation if it arrives there. There's a question on students that have been helped to register are concerned about physically coming to campus because of COVID-19. But they're also at the same time concerned that they also appreciate some type of interaction with instructors. That's really something that's left to the instructors. What we can do is truly advise that if there are instances where you could just have a Zoom session like this one with your students, it does put students a little bit at ease that they have that opportunity to ask questions along the way. And so we can encourage instructors to be as open in communication as possible. There are some ways of getting to it. For instance, I have heard that some faculty may explore the, lots of hands-on at the beginning of the semester just to get through those components and give students a little bit of peace of mind of what it would look like if they were to move online, and then transition there, if the need came by. And so all of these really just add up to, we should do our best at communicating with students and addressing questions and concerns that are unique to our classes. I can't speak for everyone. It'd be very difficult for us to just have blanket statements for all classes. And so if we could just do whatever we can to have communications open and out to them so that they could plan best. Those are things to consider. Other things to consider as we continue to move along is, flexibility. We have guidelines that basically say that if a student's experiencing some symptoms, we don't want them on campus, okay? And so we don't also want to say, okay, you have a cough, you should stay home, but I'm also going to penalize you for being absent. And so, it's having that flexibility and understanding as we trek along. We are really hopeful that based on how classes have been designed and how we've been, setting everything up, that we really won't have too much to deal with as we move along. But it's a learning curve. We'll see more of this as it percolates. And at this point, I'm gonna take a sip of water, and then if there are any questions, maybe I could start answering some of those.
No.
Nothing so far. I think we might want to address, we have faculty asking if they could take temperatures of students entering the classroom.
Yeah. So taking temperatures of students as students enter the classroom has come in as a question. I still have that question open with the system. It's difficult for us because we're not healthcare providers. We are in a position that if we see students or employees with symptoms, we can request that they go home, and that would, by implication, suggest that if they have a temperature, we can't send them home. I just think that it's a little bit of a challenge to, have an instructor at the door checking in every student walking in, and then maybe interrupting class if a student walked in late. But I think these are all questions that will have more solid answers as our return to campus guidelines come together, because we do have some of these questions still open just to get clarity on the legality side of doing that. Again, the interim guideline from UH basically do indicate that anyone experiencing any of these symptoms shouldn't be on campus. And so we're really hopeful that by having everyone funnel through the daily check-in, we should reduce most of those instances. But if there are instances that we experience, then we want to have basically kind of like a protocol on how to deal with those as they do come in. And so I'll have a more solid answer as we get closer to the start. I'm sorry, it's one of those where I don't want to promise something and then pull it from under us. That's one where I'm still uncertain. Any other questions?
Nothing new, other than employees who are required to work on campus get a COVID-19 test.
Yeah, so you know what's interesting is that COVID-19 tests have become a major limitation, and I think that that's why, one of the reasons why the August 1st got pushed to September 1st for folks that are traveling into the islands. That limitation extends to a couple of other instances. So for instance, the students that are coming in under the quarantine bubble are required to have a test. But we can't guarantee that they, one, will get the test within a short period of time from arrival, and that two, that they'll get their results any earlier than if they just quarantine for those 14 days. And so we can't at this point set that. And most of the locations that are doing the COVID tests have thresholds. So if you are experiencing some of these symptoms, then you would, or if you are being asked by your healthcare provider to get a test, then you will get the test. But otherwise, it's not every location is allowing any and everyone to test if they just want it to be tested.
We have one question. Let's see. Current registration status.
What's the question?
The question is just current registration status. Maybe that's enrollment, but
Oh,
that's from
yeah,
Nikki, who was volunteering at the convention center yesterday.
I retweeted that photo. Thank you for doing that, Nikki. So, so we have been following the enrollment trends. We are no worse than we were before. We're still narrowing the gap. We still have some bips, still with, of course, early college, which we're trying to resolve, in the immediate future. Anything that we can do to push any other enrollment, we are trying pretty intentionally. Right now, we have some challenges with, health clearances, and so we're worried about students that are already registered and whether they'll remain registered, so we're working hard on those. We're working on students that have doubts on what, the fall return would look like. Now that we have a little more clarity, we're trying to work on those. In fact, the live session that we held 2 Fridays ago included some breakout sessions for students to ask more deliberate questions on process and what they can do. And so we're trying our best to work on the enrollment. We're not doing as well as I would hope for us to be doing, but we're also not tracking too far behind. So we still have a little bit of time to make up the difference.
And then another question is, when can we expect to see a campus reopening guidelines? I say guiltily. And will they differ from UH system guidelines? So I don't know if anyone can hear. This is Kathleen. I was going to be working on them all day Sunday, and instead I spent my entire day on Hurricane Douglas emails.
So I don't know if you're hearing Kathleen, but we have been working on those guidelines, and in part I'll take the blame for it. It's really difficult for us to put out something in writing only to 3 hours later have to change it because something's happening. We're just going to have to bite the bullet and again call it interim as well and publish it. So I want to say that if not by the end of this week, by early next week, we'll have something out on the leeward specific guidelines.
Next question is it safe to assume that international students traveling from overseas are excluded from the quarantine, or will they be placed in the UH quarantine bubble?
I think that there may be, actually, I don't have an answer for that, so let me not even answer it. I'll have to ask and get back to us on that question.
And that's it for the chat.
Okay, so all that I can say is thank you all for the work. It's been a lot. We've been getting a lot of feedback. We're still putting things together. I do want to say that in this is really my vision for what fall return will look like. Our fall return, like I've said from the very beginning, we're going to have a lot fewer people on campus, a lot fewer. Again, we've shifted what was previously somewhere in the ballpark of about 70% of our classes being in some physical capacity to shifting that ratio a lot more online, a lot more hybrid. On the employee side, we're going to have, wherever possible, some maybe rotating schedules because we know that some services are going to be done remotely. But my vision does include that we have, somewhat of a regular operations on campus, and so that offices do remain open, recognizing, of course, that we have provided the resources to maintain that social distancing, that we have situations where we can control, foot traffic, all of these in place. We do want to have some type of, return to normal in terms of our campus operations. And again, all of this is very fluid based on situations. And so please work with your unit heads or continue working because, you guys have been working with your unit heads and what that return may look like. And so just setting that, we do want to have that fall return. I hope to, start seeing more of you around. I see quite a few of you more now than we were earlier during this period. And I appreciate that. And I know that, some students still rely heavily on, coming to campus for some resources. And so, we're all here to help support our students and support ourselves. And so unless there are any other questions.
Yeah, actually, Kay would like to talk a little bit about the DPC and online instruction.
Go for it. I'm going to mute myself.
Hi, everybody. I just want to elaborate a little bit more about the DPC. As you know, each division has their own DPC guidelines or rules that go through administration that are approved, that are housed at UFA and approved. So it's very important that you stay within your guidelines. I talked to the division chairs last week specifically about your DPCs, and what they said was it's kind of business as usual. If it's a paper dossier, a notebook, they will have it in your division chair's office or wherever they have it secured. You can make an appointment so that you have your social distancing and you're not meeting as a committee to review the folders. However, when it comes to time for the committee to make the decision, it is up to your division on whether you meet in person or in Zoom, and that is your decision. I do want to remind you that if you submit an electronic dossier, it is available electronically through the entire system. So therefore, your DPC, your division chair, the dean, the TPRC, everyone will review that dossier online. Which was really nice, this year they opened it up to whoever wanted to volunteer to submit electronically were given that opportunity, whereas in past years, we're limited to 5 participants. I loved being able to review everything online. It was so easy. I could do it at my own time. It had all the active links. I just thought it was a really easy way to review the dossiers. And I encourage and thank those who have participated in the past. Thank you. And for those who are doing it this year, thank you. There was a question about taking the ones that are not submitted electronically and digitizing them. I've got to say, I'm a little concerned about this for the privacy of the individual who's submitting that dossier. The reason it took a long time for the electronic system was because you cannot download, you cannot take screenshot. It protects the integrity of that person's dossier that is not being used by other people. Because in the past, there have been instances where people have been caught plagiarizing off of other dossiers. So they wanted to make sure the system was secured to do a system-wide electronic dossier. So for us to just scan those papers and send it, I would say, please be very careful, talk to the individuals. Someone might give them permission, they might give permission, I don't know. And you can check with UPA on that if you would like. Someone talked about going online. As I indicated last time, we have 66 online DE Sync and Async, which is a tremendous amount of classes. But the rest are either face-to-face or hybrid. Even though teachers are selecting those other modes of delivery other than straight online, it is because they felt that there are parts of their class they want to see the students in person, whether it's demonstration, it's the lab, it's something difficult to do straight online. But with that choice of modality came a responsibility from our faculty to be sure that they have ready at a given notice to switch online if we have to shut down because of COVID-19. You could get sick, I hope you don't, or students, or we might have, or the state might shut us down. You don't know, but we need to be prepared. We are not given the free pass of correspondence classes like we were last semester. We are expected to follow ACCJC rules. So thank you to our DE committee out of the Faculty Senate for helping to craft our DE basic guidelines for fall 2020. All teachers should be working with a partner or with their division chair to ensure that all classes have that component if need be. So that is the responsibility of our faculty. So thank you for working hard this summer, for going to those workshops and talking to your colleagues across campuses or even within your own division. Thank you. I know it's taken a lot of effort. It's not easy to change these modalities, but I really believe our faculty have stepped up and will be able to provide the quality education that our students deserve. So thank you. Someone asked me, what do we expect? And as far as our services, I have student services, academic services under the Vice Chancellor's office. All of those people are working together to come out with some kind of rollout for the fall. We expect some kind of face-to-face component as long as we're able to do it social distancing and safely according to our guidelines. But we haven't figured it all out, but when we do, we will let you know. But we expect that rollout to be happening pretty soon. August is just around the corner. I don't know what happened this summer. I wish I had another month or two, but I know that we will all work together as a team to make sure that we provide the experience and the education that our students deserve. So thank you to all of you. Thanks, Carlos. If anyone has any questions, let me know.
Thanks, Kay. And by the way, Jane, I did get a haircut, and I've been getting them more frequently with the fears of having, you know, the haircutting places shut down again. You know, just the new norm in trying to prepare for what's to come. In wrapping up, you guys, I really just want to thank you so much for your resilience through this. I know that there's a lot of creativity. We've been getting a lot of amazing ideas on what the return will look like, and we appreciate those. I want to do a shout out to everyone that helped in two recent things that have been going on. one of them, everyone that helped us move back to the AD building. So I know that a lot of work went into it. I'm happily sitting in my office. And whenever you guys want to just pay a quick visit and say hi to me, I want to just show you something that I have right in my background. And so that is my social distanced mannequin with my graduation regalia, wearing one of our face masks. It's how I try to keep sane during these at times lonely periods. But thanks everyone for the move. I'm really happy being here. And then the other thing that I want to acknowledge is everyone that really put in the effort to prepare for the hurricane. I know that a lot went into it. Everything from getting the words right down to helping me put, can I hear? Am I still? Okay?
You're cutting in and out, Carlos.
Oh,
You're cutting
sorry
in and
about
out.
that, guys.
Okay, you're fine now.
Okay. And so I was thanking those that helped us prep for the hurricane. I'm glad that, nothing really came of it. But I know that as I was walking out of here on Friday afternoon, everyone was unplugging everything. Wherever we were at risk of any leaks, we covered with, plastic bags. And so thanks everyone for all of the work. I really appreciate it, even though it's been an interesting first year for me as a chancellor with everything that's been going on. I feel super supported. And I know that, we'll all get through this. It'll be bumpy, but we're working through it. So thank you all. Appreciate everything that you're doing. And again, come and say hi whenever you're around. All righty. Have a good one.